This will sound very strange, but on May 17th, 2022, recording artist Vangelis died. Vangelis composed the song Chariots of Fire. Also on this same day, May 17th, it was first reported that for the first time ever, Israel would be conducting a simulation of a wide-scale attack on Iran and its nuclear facilities. This simulation drill over the Mediterranean Sea was part of the largest in decades large-scale military drill war exercise that the Israeli Defense Forces named Chariots of Fire. And the Israeli military did not name their drill Chariots of Fire after Vangelis, who died on May 17th. This drill was planned for and was named many days before May 17th. These prophetic signs involving Chariots of Fire that occurred on May 17th are a prophecy that is predicting that U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on October 17th, 2023. And they are also a prophecy that is predicting the date that Israel will destroy, probably with nuclear bombs, Iran's nuclear energy and weapons facilities on October 9th, 2023. This event will then lead to Israel bombing with a nuclear bomb and completely destroying Damascus, Syria. And this is predicted to occur on October 26th, 2023. It will be the first nuclear bomb used in an act of war since World War II. The post date for this video, the date that this video is posted, proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. The analysis in this video explains how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections pointed to the date August 26th, 2023, and why it was believed that this would be the predicted date that Israel would bomb Iran's nuclear energy and weapons facilities. Since the time of the original production of this video, God's signs have revealed more knowledge, and instead of bombing Iran on August 26th, August 26th ended up being an important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date that Israel will bomb Iran. It is now predicted that Israel will bomb Iran's nuclear energy and weapons facilities on October 9th, 2023. August 26th was the day that the host of the TV game show The Price is Right, Bob Barker, died at the age of 99, 9 days before September 4th. September 4th was the day of the prophetic Burning Man sign, the amazing details of which are explained in the must-watch Burning Man prophecy video. Every year at the end of the Burning Man festival, 70,000 quote-unquote burners leave en masse in what is called the Exodus. This year, the Exodus was a muddy disaster when the Playa Desert sand turned to mud due to unprecedented rain. The quote-unquote burners were trapped for days before they were finally allowed to begin the Exodus at 14 o'clock local time on September 4th, 1400 military time. The reason the Exodus began at 14 o'clock was because the disastrous Burning Man Exodus is symbolism for an evacuation, and it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant and cause an evacuation in southwest Iran on October 9th, 14 days after it is predicted that a dirty bomb or suitcase nuke will be detonated in Manhattan, New York City, and cause an evacuation of Manhattan Island on September 25th. More is explained in the Burning Man video, but this is also why DJ Diplo and Chris Rock were part of this Burning Man news story and why the video of them leaving Burning Man in the back of a pickup truck went viral. They left Burning Man with Austin Butler, who played Elvis in the recent Elvis movie, and also on September 4th was the world premiere of the new movie about Elvis's relationship with 14-year-old Priscilla. Also, the predicted evacuation in southwest Iran on October 9th will be 35 days after the prophetic Exodus evacuation from Burning Man on September 4th, and the nation of Persia was renamed Iran in 1935. And the 35th chapter of the book of Isaiah in the Bible is a prophecy about the parched land of the desert becoming a pool of water, and about a road that God's ransomed will travel on called Highway of Holiness. The burners in their exodus out of the parched land that had been turned to pools of water traveled down what is called Gate Road. And in the Bible, judgment on a people symbolically begins at the gate. The prophetic Burning Man exodus on September 4th, that was the result of sand turning to mud, was 9 days after Bob Barker died at the age of 99 on August 26th. And Barker is famous for his fight scene in a movie with Jewish comedian Adam Sandler, in which Sandler is thrown into water and is soaking wet, which hints at the sand turning to mud at Burning Man 9 days after Sandler's tribute tweet to Barker on the day he died at the age of 99. Barker rhymes with Bashur, and the fight between Barker and the Jewish comedian hints at the fight between the Jewish nation Israel and Iran when Israel will bomb Iran's Bashur nuclear power plant. Barker hosted the TV game show The Price is Right for a record 35 years, and Persia was renamed Iran in 1935. The name Bob Barker in English gematria is equal to 444, and on the day that the host of The Price is Right died, news broke that the U.S. Marines are buying, for the right price, 44 of Israel's Iron Dome launchers. This was on August 26th, which is 44 days before it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran's Bashur nuclear power plant on October 9th, which will be 17 days before it is predicted that Israel will nuke Damascus, Syria on October 26th and fulfill Isaiah chapter 17. In Hebrew gematria, Damascus, Syria is 999, and in the Bible, the number 9 is symbolic of God's judgment. And in the Bible, the city of Damascus is symbolic of the world. God will judge the world that will be led by the Antichrist after it attempts to destroy Israel and make Jerusalem an international city. It is predicted that there will be an evacuation in southwest Iran 14 days after it is predicted that there will be an evacuation in New York City on September 25th. September 25th will be exactly 9 years, which symbolizes judgment, after the birth of the second of 2 prophetic cows, born with the number 7 on its forehead. These cows pointed to the king of Egypt's dream in the Bible about 14 cows. In the dream, the 14 cows are separated into 2 sets of 7 cows, and the latter 7 cows are symbolic of the end times period of 7 years of the Antichrist. In Bible prophecy, it is said that this symbolic 7 years of the Antichrist begins after 69 sets of 7 years. This is why at the same time that the 7 cow was born on September 25th, 2014, the Antichrist spoke at the opening of the 69th UN General Assembly in New York City. which is exactly 9 years, which symbolizes judgment, before it is predicted that a dirty bomb or suitcase nuke will explode in New York City, which will lead to an evacuation of New York City, and this will be 14 days before it is predicted that there will be an evacuation in southwest Iran after it is bombed by Israel. These 14 days in between these two evacuations are hinted at with this connection to the 14 cows. It is predicted that Israel will bomb, probably with nuclear bombs, Iran's nuclear energy and weapons facilities on August 26, 2023. This will be exactly 4 times 4 months after April 26, 2022. And although it isn't completely related to the subject of this video, on April 26, 2022, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris tweeted and announced that she had the CVD disease 44 days after the 44th president tweeted and announced that he had the CVD disease. The 44th president will become the president again through the predicted death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash on October 17, 2023. It is predicted that Israel will bomb, probably with nuclear bombs, Iran's nuclear energy and weapons facilities on August 26, 2023. It was known since early 2021 that God was pointing to April 26, 2022. On this day, a big news story regarded the White House's statement that Iran's breakout time has been reduced from a year to weeks. The White House stated that it was very concerned about this. The breakout time refers to the amount of time it would take Iran to enrich enough uranium for a nuclear bomb. This was a new development regarding Iran's nuclear program, and it coincidentally occurred on April 26th, the date that was known ahead of time since 2021. This statement from the White House came after Secretary of State Anthony Blinken's testimony in a U.S. Senate hearing earlier in this day. He told Senate Foreign Relations Chairman Senator Bob Menendez that Iran's breakout time had been reduced from a year to weeks. This emphasis on weeks was a sign that God gave us that indicated that the day that Israel will nuke Iran is weeks away. But just how many weeks is the question. The Senate Foreign Relations Chairman, Bob Menendez, is the senator from New Jersey, the third state to join the Union. This indicated that the day that Israel will nuke Iran is exactly 3 weeks after the senator from the third state was told that Iran's breakout time had been reduced from a year to weeks. The date in the Hebrew calendar on which the senator from the third state was told Iran's breakout time is now weeks was the 24th day of the first month. In the Bible, the prophet Daniel was visited by Archangel Michael on the 24th day of the first month. Daniel had been mourning for 3 weeks, and Gabriel told Daniel that he had been held up in a battle against the Prince of Persia for 3 weeks. The Prince of Persia is symbolism for Satan and the Antichrist. 3 weeks prior to the senator from the third state being told that Iran's breakout time is weeks, and the White House stating that Iran's breakout time is now weeks, was the day that the Antichrist, Barack Obama, famously returned for the first time to the White House. On the day that Obama returned to the White House, a fox was put down after biting 9 people on Capitol Hill, including a U.S. congressman from the 7th District of California. In the Bible, Jesus referred to King Herod as a fox, and Herod is Antichrist symbolism. In the book of Joshua and in Bible prophecy in the book of Revelation, there are 3 sets of 7 judgments from God. 3 weeks is 3 times 7 days. 3 times 7 days connects the congressman from the 7th district to the senator from the 3rd state. The Antichrist returning to the White House is an action involving an arrival and a destination, similar to how Gabriel arrived at Daniel's location in ancient Persia after battling the Prince of Persia. The ancient kingdom of Persia was located where modern Iran is, which is why it is amazing that on the day it was reported that Iran's breakout time had gone from a year to weeks, on the 24th day of the first month, is the same date in Daniel chapter 10 regarding the Prince of Persia. The book of Esther in the Bible is a story that regards the Jews' experience in ancient Persia and how they were persecuted on 2 13th days of the calendar months. From the Bible, the number 13 is Antichrist symbolism. And this is one reason why. In the book of Esther, Haman, a type for the Antichrist in ancient Persia, persecuted the Jews on the 2 13th days of the months. When Obama first entered politics, he represented the 13th district of Illinois. Prior to becoming senator, Bob Menendez represented the 13th district of New Jersey, the 3rd state to join the Union. 3 divided by 13 equals 0.230. God pairs the numbers 3 and 13 together to symbolize the number 23, which is the jersey number that the basketball president wore when he played basketball in high school. Also, a main hero in the book of Esther is Mordecai. It seems that the name Menendez hints at Mordecai. Gabriel said that he was able to visit Daniel after 3 weeks with the assistance of Archangel Michael. 7 times in Bible prophecy, a period of 1,260 days is mentioned as symbolism for the period of the Antichrist's rule. The feminine version of the name Michael is Michelle. Exactly 1,260 days prior to April 26th, which was the 24th day of the first month, the symbolic day that Archangel Gabriel was assisted by Archangel Michael, was the release date of Michelle Obama's memoir book, Becoming. She will become the vice president after Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash due to a bird strike. On April 26th, Kamala Harris tweeted she had COVID and mentioned that she was glad she took, which is the mark of the Antichrist and not a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. And the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is for the purpose of proving this. She tweeted this 44 days after the 44th president tweeted the very same thing, that he had COVID and that he was glad he took. Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash will be the door through which Barack Obama becomes president again and Antichrist. And so on April 26th, Kamala Harris tweeted she had and that she was glad to have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And exactly 3 weeks after this was May 17th and the day of the prophetic signs regarding Israel nuking Iran. On May 17th, music artist Vangelis died, the composer of Chariots of Fire, and in a minute I will explain the prophetic relevance of this. In Bible prophecy, it is said that the Antichrist will rule for a symbolic 42 months. 42 biblical months of 30 days each is 1,260 days. Exactly 1,260 days prior to the 24th day of the first month, the day that the White House stated that it was concerned that Iran's breakout time had gone from a year to weeks, and Kamala Harris tweeted that she had and was glad to have taken the mark of the Antichrist, was the day of Michelle Obama's book release. This connection to the name Michelle and Archangel Michael, who battled the Prince of Persia after Gabriel had been battling the Prince of Persia for 3 weeks, is additional confirmation for adding 3 weeks to the 24th day of the first month, which was April 26th. This results in May 17th, which was the day of astounding prophetic signs that confirm that on June 27th, Israel will nuke Iran, for which ancient Persia symbolizes. All right, why do I say that Israel will bomb Iran on June 27th, 2022? Because this video was produced last year before June 27th, 2022. I am now recording this a couple of days before May 17th, 2023. And the rest of this video will be partly an explanation for prophetic signs that are leading to June 27th. The rest of this video is truly amazing. It is one of my more favorite videos because of the theme of it in this video. Make sure you watch the rest of this video. I highly recommend doing so. And for the remainder of the trail of signs, from June 27th, 2022 to August 26th, 2023, the date it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran, make sure you watch the absolute must-watch Chernobyl prophecy video on this channel. It is about far more than just Chernobyl. I had to give it a title, and that's one of the many, many signs in that video that will be explained how it relates to Israel bombing Iran and Damascus. But make sure you watch that video after this video, and that will explain the remainder of the trail of signs from June 27th, 2022 to August 26th, 2023. As was explained, the signs on April 26th pointed to May 17th, 3 weeks later. Sure enough, we received the expected prophetic signs on May 17th. The big news story on May 17th regarding Israel was the first news report that within their largest in decades military drill, named Chariots of Fire, would be the first ever simulation over the Mediterranean Sea of a large-scale strike on Iran. All of the news articles emphasize the duration of the drill. Some articles refer to the drill as being weeks long, and some articles refer to it as a month-long drill. One article refers to the drill as being a 3-week-long drill and then mentions there being a 4th week. The 4th week consists of army training in Cyprus and also the first ever simulation of a wide-scale strike on Iran to be conducted over the Mediterranean Sea. The emphasis on the timing and duration of the drill, and also arguably the mention of the 3 weeks within the drill, is confirmation of the 3 weeks connection to April 26th. So, since 2021, April 26th was known to be a prophetic date regarding Israel attacking Iran, and then on April 26th, for the first time, the White House stated that Iran's breakout time had been reduced to weeks. It was revealed that adding 3 weeks to April 26th pointed to May 17th, and then on May 17th was the first report of Israel's first ever simulation of a wide-scale attack on Iran. Also on May 17th, it was reported that Israeli Defense Minister Gantz warned that, quote, the price for tackling the Iranian challenge on a global or regional level is higher than it was a year ago and lower than it will be in a year, end quote. From this statement that was reported on May 17th, I assume that he was implying that Israel's attack on Iran is imminent. He also spoke about the recent developments regarding Iran's nuclear program. Also on May 17th, Israeli Prime Minister Bennett, for the first time, publicly affirmed major new settlement construction in the West Bank, thus adding to the prophetic significance of May 17th regarding Israel. What is truly stunning is that on this same May 17th day, in which the news of the Chariots of Fire war exercise drill was first reported, the composer of the song Chariots of Fire died. The Oscar-winning composer Vangelis died at the age of 79 on May 17th. Vangelis' birth name is Evangelos. His career spanned over 50 years, and he composed and performed more than 50 albums. The number 50 symbolizes the church, and the name Evangelos hints at the evangelical church, making the death of Vangelis on May 17th a judgment warning sign for the evangelical church that is spiritually dying. This Vangelis judgment warning sign for the evangelical church occurred 3 sets of 7 days after Kamala Harris announced she had COVID and took the mark of the Antichrist. The Antichrist will use the mark of the Antichrist to persecute the church. This June is the 50th anniversary of the release of the famous album produced by Vangelis' 1970s band Aphrodite's Child. The album is named 666, and all of the songs on the album pertain to some aspect of the end times prophetic book of Revelation in the Bible. This connection is astounding because God frequently uses 50 years connections in his true big picture of signs that is only being explained on this channel. From the Bible, 50 years connections are extremely prophetic, and again, the number 50 symbolizes the church. Israel's attack on Iran in this month of June will be game changers and will directly lead to the end times events described in the book of Revelation. Hence the reason for the death of Vangelis and this 50 years connection to the album named 666, which is about the book of Revelation. The name of the album 666 confirms the exact 6 weeks connection from Vangelis' death and the news of Israel's Chariots of Fire drill on May 17th to June 27th. Vangelis' last solo album was recorded in 2021, and it was his 23rd and last solo studio album. As explained in other videos, God uses the number 23, which is the 9th prime number, to symbolize judgment and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. This album was produced for NASA's Juno probe mission to Jupiter. In ancient Hebrew astrology and in God's signs, Jupiter is the king planet that symbolizes the Messiah. And so Vangelis, whose name is Evangelos, who made 50 albums, which hints at the church, the evangelical church, his last studio album, his 23rd album, points to this planet Jupiter, which symbolizes the church because it symbolizes the Messiah. It is the Messiah planet in ancient Hebrew astrology. And one reason being is that there are, for example, 53 named moons officially of Jupiter, and Jupiter is known for its stripes and its big red spot. It's actually called the big red spot, and this hints at Isaiah chapter 53, which speaks of the Messiah and him healing through his stripes, healing mankind through his stripes. And he was pierced for our transgressions, and the big red spot is symbolic of the spear that was used to pierce Jesus. Also, Jupiter in astrology is the planet that represents Jupiter, the Roman god, which is also Zeus, which is a god in the lineage dating back to the god Baal in the Bible. They are all masks for the same entity, Satan. And so, in other words, Jupiter is also Antichrist symbolism. And that's why the 23rd album and last album points to Jupiter, because in this context, the symbolism is also Antichrist. And again, Vangelos is famous for having composed the album 666. And this June of 2022 was the 50th anniversary. Vangelis died at the age of 79. Thank you to Steve Fletcher of YouTube channel Fletcher222 for the following connection involving the number 79. The 79th word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance is the word to wrestle. Jacob wrestled God in Genesis chapter 32, after which Jacob was renamed Israel. The name Israel means to wrestle with God. The end times period will be a manifestation of Israel wrestling with God. Israel will bomb Iran exactly 6 weeks after Vangelis died at 79, and this will usher in the beginning of the end times period of Israel wrestling with God, referred to as Jacob's hour of trouble in the book of the prophet Jeremiah in the Bible. Jacob's hour of trouble is a reference to the times of crises that Israel will face from the nations of the world just prior to the coming of the Messiah and the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ in 2024. All right, at this point of this video, you should be able to appreciate how it is that God's big picture of signs works. It works on him pointing to certain dates in advance through connections to other prophetic signs in order to establish another date in the trail of signs. These dates are like points in a puzzle, if you will, and they connect to each other and provide greater meaning to the prophetic signs than they otherwise would have without their connections. In other words, it's not possible. In other words, the full intended meaning of God's prophetic signs cannot be understood properly without their context and connection to other prophetic signs. This is why God establishes trails of signs from date to date. Prior to a date, it's not usually possible to discern if that will be the end of that particular trail or it will be another step. For example, April 26th, as I've mentioned a few times now, 2022, was known since 2021 to be an important date regarding Israel bombing Iran. Prior to that, it was assumed that that would be the date because that's what God essentially was saying through his big picture of signs. But it turned out to be another step in the trail of signs, as being explained. And again, that was the day of the prophetic signs related, clear, relevant, related prophetic signs to Israel bombing Iran, which has been explained. The same is true for May 17th. As I explained, May 17th was known ahead of time, and then that was the prophetic date of the first news of the Chariots of Fire military drill on the day that the composer that composed Chariots of Fire died. Okay, so May 17th was known ahead of time, and likewise, prior to May 17th, it was natural to assume that that would be the date that Israel would bomb Iran, because God was pointing to that date with such prophetic related signs. But it turned out to be another step. And this video, as I just mentioned a bit ago, the rest of this video is establishing a trail of signs leading to June 27th, but it was made before June 27th. And so the signs that occurred on June 27th, which made it another step on the trail of signs, are explained in the Chernobyl video, as I mentioned. And furthermore, in the Chernobyl video will be the continuation of the trail of signs leading to May 17th. The reason for going into that is, one, to make it clear that this is how God's big picture of signs works. But what I'm also going to explain just for the next couple of minutes, just not very long at all, is how also tied into this is, because God overlaps signs, obviously. In other words, what I'm saying is that overlapping with this theme of Israel bombing Iran, God has also included signs related to the upcoming predicted crash of Kamala Harris in her airplane, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist, who will persecute Israel, right? That's one reason why they overlap. Now, what I'm going to explain here is how the signs related to the predicted day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash went through the date June 7th. But this video was made prior to June 7th. And so it was assumed that because God was pointing to June 7th, that would be the date that she would die in a plane crash. But again, it turned out to be another step. We had, again, clear, relevant signs that related to Kamala Harris dying in a plane crash, which I explain and have already explained in other videos, and I won't explain it at all here. But what I will do is just explain how the death of Evangelist, in fact, also connects to the death of Kamala Harris. So, in other words, what I'm saying is that the death of Evangelist, the composer of Chariots of Fire, and this video is about the death of Evangelist and the Chariots of Fire prophetic sign. That's the theme of this video. And it's going to get even more interesting when I start explaining the movie Chariots of Fire and how it all is related to all of this. But the death of Evangelist is a part of this. And it isn't only for pointing to the Chariots of Fire military drill, it's also for pointing to the death of Kamala Harris. And so that's how Evangelist overlaps. And so it wouldn't be appropriate to only explain the side of Evangelist's death regarding the prediction for Israel bombing Iran, and leaving out the death of the prediction for Kamala Harris. But the thing is that Evangelist's death points to June 7th. And of course, she didn't die on June 7th, so I'm explaining this to you now so that you're not confused. But it's still important to understand, if you will. So I'm going to explain again how Evangelist's death is pointing to June 7th, the date it was predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, but that was a step on the trail of signs, and we received the Kamala Harris signs on that day that confirmed this analysis. But it's interesting, and so let's just take a couple of minutes to explain this. As explained in other videos, God is using Harrison Ford and his acting career, which is filled with him in roles of a pilot. And he is known for his aviation hobby, and he is a spokesman for the aviation community. And his aviation mishaps as a witness, which is why Harrison Ford was nominated for an Oscar award for his role in the movie Witness, to point to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash on the date June 7th, which is 6/7. This includes, for example, a movie named 6 Days, 7 Nights, in which Harrison Ford actually flew the plane. It is actually Harrison Ford flying the plane in the scenes in this movie. The plot of this movie centers around a plane crash, and Harrison Ford's character's name is Harris. The title of the movie, 6 Days, 7 Nights, hints at the date 6/7. Kamala Harris's plane will crash on the date 6/7. Evangelist is known for producing the soundtrack to the film Blade Runner, starring Harrison Ford. Ford is known for his aviation hobby and, coincidentally, for his many acting roles portraying a pilot. In Blade Runner, Ford famously flies a flying car. On the same day that Evangelist died, it was first reported that Harrison Ford will star in his first TV series, a spin-off of the very popular Yellowstone TV series. God is using the TV series Yellowstone to point to the upcoming eruption of Yellowstone volcano, which will be on February 24th, 2024. The song Chariots of Fire begins with synthesized French horns. The song begins with what is unmistakably a series of trumpet blasts. They are the same type of trumpet blast that Jews blow on the Feast of Trumpets, when they blow the shofar horn. These trumpet blasts are a type of announcement, which is the imagery we get with the trumpet blasts in the opening of the song Chariots of Fire. After the Hebrews marched around Jericho 7 times, 7 priests blew 7 trumpets, which was 3 sets of 7. Then the walls of security collapsed on Jericho in God's judgment. There are also 3 sets of 7 judgments in the book of Revelation, including 7 trumpet judgments. God is using Harrison Ford to point to the death of Harris in a plane crash. The composer of Chariots of Fire also composed the soundtrack to Blade Runner, starring Harrison Ford, and on the day the composer of Chariots of Fire died, it was reported that Harrison Ford will star in the Yellowstone spin-off, and 3 sets of 7 days later, Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. The song Chariots of Fire begins with trumpet blasts, and the composer Vangelis died 3 sets of 7 days, and Harrison Ford was in the news 3 sets of 7 days after Kamala Harris announced and trumpeted that she had and took the mark of the Antichrist, which in turn was 44 days after the Antichrist 44th president announced the same thing. Chariots of Fire opens with trumpet blasts, and on May 17th, the composer of Chariots of Fire died exactly 3 sets of 7 days before June 7th. On June 7th, Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist, the 44th president, which will be the result of America's walls of security collapsing in God's judgment. Vangelis lived in London. He won an Oscar Academy Award for Chariots of Fire, but he famously did not attend the Oscars awards ceremony in Los Angeles because he had a fear of flying. Vangelis scored the movie Blade Runner, in which Harrison Ford famously flies a flying car. Ford and Vangelis were both in the news on May 17th, and the story about his non-appearance at the Academy Awards ceremony is more confirmation that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash 3 sets of 7 days after his death. In order to get Vangelis to the Oscars, he was offered a free stateroom aboard the yacht Queen Elizabeth II. However, he refused the offer. This connection between Vangelis and his fear of flying and the Queen's yacht hinted at the rise of Queen Michelle Obama after the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash 3 sets of 7 days after Vangelis and Harrison Ford were both in the news. All right, to summarize here, God is using Harrison Ford and his aviation hobby and his career in roles, in his acting career, in his roles as a pilot, and his infamous aviation mishaps to hint at the death of Kamala Harris in an aviation mishap. That's why Harrison Ford. And Harrison Ford overlapped Vangelis' death on May 17th when Harrison Ford was in the news as a prophetic sign. A lot of the events regarding Harrison Ford these days are the big symbolic ones. And anyway, that's because, again, it overlaps the signs that God is using to point to the eruption of Yellowstone. So, that's how it works. God has used, in this case, Harrison Ford in multiple different ways, communicating different things. So, and Vangelis is, he composed the music for Blade Runner, in which Harrison Ford flies a flying car, and Vangelis is famous for his fear of flying. In fact, he didn't go to the Oscars to pick up his Oscar for the song Chariots of Fire due to this fear of flying. And we are talking about the Chariots of Fire sign on May 17th. And so that's all the more reason to know that this is also pointing to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. And again, Chariots of Fire, that's what it's about. And Evangelist didn't go to get his Oscar because of his 4 Chariots of Fire, because of his fear of flying. This song famously begins with a trumpet call. And that's hinting at Joshua and the 3 sets of 7 in Joshua, which God uses frequently in his big picture of signs as symbolism for walls of security collapsing in his judgment, which is why it is 3 sets of 7 days to the date June 7th. And again, June 7th ended up being an important step in the trail of signs. I won't explain the signs in this video, though. They are explained in other videos. The Kamala Harris videos. Make sure you watch all of them, obviously, when the prediction comes to pass, especially. So you'll have to take my word for it in this video, though, that June 7th was confirmed to be correct, and the analysis was correct for pointing to June 7th, which was exactly 3 sets of 7 days after May 17th. However, I will just say in this video, because God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And that's what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And this 3 sets of 7, as I mentioned, as I explained, begins with the trumpet call, which is the Chariots of Fire song, begins with a trumpet call, French horns. And in the Bible, again, it's 3 sets of 7 before the Hebrews blew trumpets and the walls of security collapsed on Jericho in God's judgment. The parallel with our time is trump, God's trumpet, and his border wall of security. And on June 7th, which was 3 sets of 7 days after May 17th and the trumpet call, with the death of Evangelist because of his song Chariots of Fire, on the day of the Chariots of Fire drill that Israel announced, the news of that, on June 7th was the signs that confirmed this 3 sets of 7 days from the trumpet call, was Kamala Harris's prophetic announcement regarding the border wall of security. Now, June 7th was known ahead of time because of other... June 7th, 2022 was a date that was known since January of 2022 to be a very prophetic date. And there is a lot to be said, but like I said, it'll be explained in the other video. And so that was one of the signs. She made this announcement regarding the border wall of security. Also on that day, it was news that the biggest ever, and God uses records for his signs, caravan of immigrants began their march towards the border wall of security. I forget the name of the town in southern Mexico where these thousands of migrants had gathered from other parts of Central America, etc., from around the world really, but they gathered there, and then the big kickoff date for their march walk, which was symbolic of a march, as in the march that the Hebrews did around the walls of Jericho. That day was June 7th. So it was the biggest ever migrant caravan to the wall of security, and it was symbolic of a march, and on and on. And there's more to it. There's also, it was the 7th day after the 49 Palms Trail in Joshua Tree National Park was closed, and in the book of Joshua, Joshua led the Hebrews around the walls of security of Jericho for 7 days before they blew the trumpets, and then the walls collapsed. And the trail is symbolic of a march, and it was due to the sheep's, the bighorn sheep, which is what the trumpets were made out of, because they wanted the sheep to have access to water. So they closed down the 49 Palms Trail, and 49 palms, since that's 7 times 7. And the Hebrews marched around 7 times while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. So that was a 7 times 7 in the book of Joshua. And Kamala Harris is the 49th vice president, and she is from Los Angeles, which is near the Joshua Tree National Park. So you get the idea. So June 7th was very important. I just confirmed it for you. I didn't think that I would go into that much detail, but I thought that I needed to, because that's how it works. You need to provide the second witnesses. Otherwise, what is he talking about, right? And so anyway, and those, what I just explained, also in turn require second and third witnesses, and those second and third witnesses also require second and third witnesses, and it just goes off into infinity. But I've done enough now to confirm for you the prophetic significance of June 7th and how it is prophetically relevant that it was 3 sets of 7 days after the death of Evangelus, who is famous for having a fear of flying and refused to attend the ceremony for his Oscar award due to his fear of flying, and the Queen offered her yacht to go to the ceremony, and on and on. So, and that's why we connect here Harrison Ford, who is also in the news on May 17th, and this connects to Kamala Harris's plane crash, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist. So there you have it. God is trumpeting the arrival of the Antichrist through all of this. Now, what is very, very interesting here, and actually it's amazing, and when the prediction comes to pass, it will prove that what I'm about to say is true, is that both June 7th and May 17th connect profoundly to the date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, and both of the connections are related to each other. That's what's amazing about it. They aren't just profound connections to the date Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Both of the connections from June 7th and from May 17th, 2022 relate to each other. And that's because May 17th, 2022 is exactly 17 months before October 17th, the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. And June 7th, 2022 is exactly 71 weeks before October 17th, 2023, the date Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. 17 months and 71 weeks are related to each other because they are combinations of the number 1 and 7, as is October 17th in 2023. In fact, this is the reason why the connection of 17 months and exactly 71 weeks. It is because October 17th hints at the number 117, which is another combination of 1s and a 7. And the reason for all of this is because the number 117 is extremely important in God's big picture of signs. It, for one thing, is 9 times 13. And again, the number 13 is symbolic of the Antichrist from the Bible. It is symbolism for the Antichrist. Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews on the 2 13th days of the month. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews on the 2 13th days of the month, and Nimrod was the 13th generation from Ham. I got that backwards. And the 2 Antichrists are described in the last book of the Bible in Revelation chapter 13. And so also the number 9 is the most important number in God's signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. And so 9 times 13 equals 117. However, the bigger reason, if you will, no, I shouldn't say that, but another big reason for 117 is that it hints at 1,117. 1,170. It's 117 with a 0 at the end. And that is because 1,170 is 390 plus 390 plus 390. God repeats a number 3 times in order to provide it emphasis, to emphasize the symbolism in the number. And the number 390 is extremely important because this number appears, for example, in the very important prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 4, but also the Apostle James quoted Amos 9:11 from the Old Testament when he used the word return from that prophecy, which regards the return of the Lord to rebuild his temple at the end of the age. And so in Strong's Concordance, the 390th Greek word that James used when he quoted that prophecy is 390. And so the number 390 is, in other words, symbolic of the Lord's return. And that's why an emphasis of that number, which is that number repeated 3 times, added together equals 1,170, which is 117 with a 0 at the end. That said, there is one last super profound reason for why 117 is extremely prophetic. And that is that it hints at 11 times 7. Or rather, I should say, well, let me just, I'm jumping ahead, but let's go there first. The death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash will point to and will also mirror Flight 77 on 9/11. Flight 77 was the flight that departed from Washington, D.C. on its way to Los Angeles when it was hijacked and then diverted back to Washington and crashed into the Pentagon. That was Flight 77. Kamala Harris's flight will be, as predicted, a flight from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, and it will crash during its flight. Okay, so that's Flight 77, and 77 is 11 times 7, and 11 times 7 hints at 117. But the bigger reason for that, and why Flight 77, which hints at 11 times 7, is that in the Bible, the number 11 symbolizes God's promises. His promises of blessings and curses that he described to the Hebrews right before they crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Now, I won't go through the list of the reasons for why the number 11 symbolizes God's promises. Well, I'll just say when they crossed into the Promised Land, it was on the 10th day of the first month, Nisan 10, which is 110, which hints at 110. And that's also, which hints at the number 11. And that's also why, for example, on 9/11, the Twin Towers were 110 stories high. It's because it symbolizes the date Nisan 10, which is also the date that Jesus first entered Jerusalem. So the Hebrews crossed the Jordan River on the same calendar date that Jesus entered Jerusalem, and that's designed by God. And it's Nisan 10, 110, which hints at 11. All right, and the 2 towers that were 110 stories hints at Jesus' second coming, because his first coming is symbolized by 110. So also God's curses is also symbolized by the number 11. In the Bible, the number 11 appears in context of God's execution of judgment, including, for example, the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11, which is what the World Trade Center hinted at because the Twin Towers looked like a giant 11. And they were in New York State, the 11th state, and New York City has 11 letters in its name. And on Flight 11, which crashed into the North Tower, there were 81 passengers, but there was a crew of 11 people. 81 hints at 8 plus 1 equals 9, so 9 and 11. On the second plane, there were 56 passengers, and 5 plus 6 equals 11. And building number 7 had 47 towers, and 4 plus 7 equals 11, and on and on. And that's because, again, the number 11 symbolizes the execution of God's judgment, which points to and is symbolized, it's symbolism for the promises of God's curses if in the future, after they go into the promised land, turn away from God. And that's what God was pointing to through 9/11. He pointed to how Washington had consecrated the nation to God in Trinity Chapel after he was inaugurated in Lower Manhattan at his first inauguration. And Trinity Chapel was the only building at Ground Zero to have survived the falling debris, and did so without even a broken window. And that's because God pointed to Trinity Chapel, and how Washington, when he was inaugurated, afterwards went into Trinity Chapel and said that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its divine protection and blessings. All right, so I had to give you that big, long explanation for why October 17th, because the death of Kamala Harris will lead to the rise of the Antichrist through her replacement. But October 17th is a combination of ones and a 7. And that's why 17 and 71 God also uses for this same symbolism, as well as other combinations such as 177 and, well, you get the idea. So, again, we have these two dates, May 17th and June 7th, which are connected with each other by three sets of 7 days, and that's relevant because the song Chariots of Fire begins with a trumpet call, and after the 3 sets of 7, before the walls of security fell on Jericho after the Hebrews crossed into the promised land, there was a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched around the walls for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, they marched 7 times while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. So 3 sets of 7, but also the 2 connections from May 17th, 2022 and June 7th, 2022 are exactly 17 months and exactly 71 weeks. Therefore, they parallel each other, if you will, and they both connect to the date that has a combination of 1s and a 7. And so there you have it. That's why all of this is amazing and confirmation that confirms itself. Now, God pairs the numbers 9 and 17 together to confirm the signs and connections, and also to point to the Antichrist, who was president from 2009 until 2017. And what I will now explain is a confirmation of the 17 months from May 17th, 2022 to October 17th, 2023, the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. I will confirm this. This will be confirmed, or God is confirming this through a pairing with the number 9. Because Evangelist composed the song Chariots of Fire in memory of his father, who was an Olympic athlete. And the movie Chariots of Fire is about the 1924 Olympics and the athlete Eric Liddell, which I will now explain, and is why this particular video is one of my favorites, because of this story regarding Eric Liddell. And Eric Liddell wore number 9. He was in his race, in his prophetic important race, which I will explain. He was number 9. He was on his jersey. He's not wearing. You know how with runners, they don't have jersey numbers like other athletes, but they have the number pinned to their shirt? Well, that's the case. He has the number 9 pinned to his shirt. He is number 9 in the race. And that pairs with the 17 months, because this sign is about the chariots of fire. This is a chariots of fire sign, Evangelist's death, and it's all pointing to Eric Liddell. That's my point. This is all pointing to Eric Liddell, and in particular, the one race in which he wore number 9. All right, now we have arrived at my personal favorite part of the death of Evangelist's prophetic sign, which is that God is pointing to the movie Chariots of Fire, because he is pointing to the real-life true story that the movie is based on. Again, May 17th was known ahead of time because of the signs that occurred on April 26th. And as was explained, April 26th revealed 3 weeks. 3 weeks later was May 17th. One reason being was the senator from the third state in the signs on April 26th. After May 17th, it was discovered that there is profound evidence for June 27th, which will be explained more later and in other videos. However, June 27th is exactly 9 weeks after April 26th. The senator from the third state gave us 3 weeks connections, and it is interesting that 9 weeks is 3 times 3 weeks. But given everything, including how April 26th pointed to May 17th, I suspected or speculated that there might be a numerical confirmation within the signs on May 17th, including the death of Vangelis, that would point to the day that Israel will attack Iran. And so, therefore, I was looking for one thing, the number 9, to confirm the 9 weeks connection from April 26th to June 27th. By the way, if I haven't mentioned yet in this video, the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, as from the Bible it symbolizes judgment. Although I do think that the senator from the third state, hinting at 3 times 3 weeks, is in itself a confirmation. In a search that I did not find a relevant relationship between Vangelis and the number 9, and so I discontinued the search. Later, without any intention of finding a numeric connection, while eating dinner, I thought I should watch the movie Chariots of Fire. Unfortunately, it's not available for free, but I found something much better, The Real Chariots of Fire, a documentary for which I will leave a link to this documentary, The Real Chariots of Fire, in the description box below this video. The story Chariots of Fire is based on the true story of 2 British athletes in the 1924 Olympics. Eric Liddell, a devout Scottish Christian who runs for the glory of God, and Harold Abrahams, an English Jew who runs to overcome prejudice. Interestingly, the film's title was inspired by the line, quote, "Bring me my chariot of fire," end quote, from the William Blake poem adapted into a British hymn, Jerusalem. After years of training and racing, the 2 athletes are accepted to represent Great Britain in the 1924 Olympics in Paris. Eric Liddell discovers that the heats for his 100-meter race will be held on a Sunday. Despite intense pressure from the Prince of Wales and the British Olympic Committee, he refuses to run the race because his Christian convictions prevent him from running on the Lord's Day, on the Sabbath Sunday. Instead, Liddell ran the 400-meter race, which was held on the Thursday. Liddell's religious convictions in the face of national athletic pride made headlines around the world, and he delivered a sermon at the Paris Church of Scotland that Sunday, on the Sunday of his race. And in his sermon, he quoted from Isaiah chapter 40. And this, I believe, is what God is doing through this prophetic sign. He's pointing to the movie Chariots of Fire, and he's pointing to these endurance runners, and he's pointing to the religious faith of Liddell, and he's also pointing to Isaiah chapter 40. I'm just going to read some of Isaiah chapter 40 here. A voice cries, "In the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Go on up to a high mountain, O Zion, herald of good news. Lift up your voice with strength, O Jerusalem, herald of good news. Lift it up, fear not. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God. Behold, the Lord comes with his might, and his arm rules for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his recompense before him. He will tend his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms. He will carry them in his bosom and gently lead those that are with young. To whom then will you liken the Lord? Or what likeness compare him with? Do you not know? Do you not hear? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain, and spreads them like a tent to dwell in. He brings princes to nothing, and makes the rulers of the earth as emptiness. The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint. And the following verses, the last verses of Isaiah chapter 40, are pointing to these two British athletes, these two endurance runners. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength, and they shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. All right, now I've just given you a little bit of what the story of Chariots of Fire is about. I highly recommend watching the documentary for which the link to will be in the description box below this video. But I'm now just going to read to you a little bit from an email I sent friends regarding my thoughts regarding these discoveries in this prophetic sign. And so, as I wrote, after this, watching the documentary, I watched it at the end of the day, and I was browsing the history of Eric Liddell on Wikipedia. At one point, after having gone through the page about him, I found myself gazing at the photo of him on the Wikipedia page. I was just marveling at some things about the period, such as the runner footwear, or the interest of the large crowd in a foot race, or the hat being waved. And then it dawned on me that in this iconic photo of him crossing the finish line, he is wearing number 9. In other words, I wasn't looking for the number 9 at this point. It turns out that this particular race, in which this iconic photo of Eric Liddell of him crossing the finish line, occurred just a few days after the Olympics in Paris. The British Empire countries competed against Team USA in a meet in England. This is truly beautiful. Liddell didn't compete for Great Britain in the 4x400 relay race because it was held on a Sabbath. As a result, Great Britain placed third, and this was a big deal at the time. It's thought that had Liddell ran in the race, Great Britain could have won gold in the 4x400 meter relay race. Instead, their rival, the Americans, won the gold in the 4x400 meter race in the 1924 Olympics. Prior to the 400 meter race, in which he won Olympic gold, Eric Liddell, he won gold in the 400 meter race, a team masseur had handed him a folded paper that read, quote, "Those who honor me, I will honor," end quote. Liddell recognized the reference to 1 Samuel 2:30. Liddell was inspired by someone else believing in him and for not running in the 100-meter race because it was held on a Sunday. I'm just going to read a little bit from Wikipedia that explains this story better than I can. So, the 1924 Summer Olympics were hosted by the city of Paris. A devout Christian, Liddell, withdrew from the 100-meter race, his best event, because the heats were going to be held on a Sunday. The schedule had been published several months earlier, and therefore his decision was made well before the games. Liddell spent the intervening months training for the 400-meter race. Though his best pre-Olympics time of 49.6 seconds, set in winning the 1924 AAA Championship 440-yard race, was modest by international standards. On the morning of the Olympic 400-meter final, on the 11th of July 1924, Liddell was handed a folded square of paper by one of the team masseurs. Reading it later, he found the message, "In the old book it says, 'He that honors me, I will honor.' Wishing you the best of success always. Recognizing the reference to 1 Samuel 2:30, Liddell was profoundly moved that someone other than his coach believed in him and the stance he had taken. The pipe band for the 51st Highland Brigade played outside the stadium for the hour before he ran. So again, he's running the 400-meter race, even though that's not his strong race. But because it's being held on a weekday, he's going to run this race instead of the 100, which he would have more than likely won gold had he run. So he's going to run the 400-meter race. The 400-meter had been considered a middle-distance event in which runners raced around the first bend before coasting down the back straight. Inspired by the biblical message that his masseurs gave him, and deprived of a view of the other runners because he drew the outside lane. So if you can picture that, in these types of races, it's because it's a circular track, he's got the outside lane, so he can't see the runners behind him. Because of this, Liddell raced the whole of the first 200 meters to be well clear of the favored Americans. With little option but to treat the race as a complete sprint, he continued to race around the final bend. He was challenged all the way down the home straight, but he held on to take the win. He broke the Olympic and world records with a time of 47.6 seconds. His record held on for 12 years until it was broken by another British athlete at the Berlin Olympics in 1936. After the Olympics and graduation from the University of Edinburgh, Liddell continued to compete. His refusal to compete on Sunday meant he had also missed the Olympic 4x400 meter relay, in which Britain finished third. This is the big thing about this story in terms of the prophetic significance and theme, is what I'm explaining. Britain finished third in the 4x400 meter race at the Olympics. But just a few days after the Olympic Games, his final leg, Liddell's final leg of the 4x400 meter race in a British Empire versus USA contest, helped secure the victory over the gold medal winning Americans. So in other words, they beat the Americans just a few days later, and thereby demonstrated that they were the best. It was the Americans that were dominant at the Olympics, and the Americans, were the rivals of the British, which is why it is beautiful that a few days after the 4x400 meter relay race, in which Great Britain came third due to Liddell not running, that Liddell ran the last leg and won the 4x400 meter relay race against the Americans, proving that he and Great Britain were the best. This moment is captured in this photo, in which he is wearing number 9. So I hope I explained that well enough for you. I hope you can perceive the inspiring message that God has demonstrated through this. Liddell won the race and proved that he and his Great Britain team were the best just after the Olympics, where he sacrificed winning gold for his team and country for his love of God. It is an inspiring story of victory through faith in Christ. Vangelis composed the Chariots of Fire track as an ode to his father, who was an Olympic athlete. This connection to the number 9 through Vangelis and his death, whose real name is Evangelos, meaning evangelical, and the moment in sports when America was defeated by a man that dedicated his life to spreading the gospel, is a judgment warning for the American evangelical church. Again, the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. From the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. I'm just going to repeat this to make sure that the connection is apparent. Vangelis composed this track in honor of his father, who was an Olympic athlete. And the name Vangelis means evangelical. And Eric Liddell was born in China and died in China because he dedicated his life to spreading the gospel, to evangelism. In fact, in Chinese literature, Eric Liddell is considered to be the first Chinese champion, Olympic champion. They consider him to be one of their own because he was born and died in China. But he was there as an evangelical spreading the gospel, and he dedicated his life to that. And then we have this movie made about him, Chariots of Fire, for which Vangelis, whose name is Evangelical, composed the extremely famous genre-changing track of the 1980s, Chariots of Fire song. And here, through this pointing to the number 9, through this story of Chariots of Fire and simulation of an attack on Iran in a drill named Chariots of Fire, we have confirmation for adding 9 weeks to April 26th and the prophetic signs on that day to June 27th. All right, in terms of confirmation signs, Eric Liddell's story within Chariots of Fire gives us the number 9. But what about Harold Abraham's? What is his role and what is the relevance of him in this prophetic sign? Surely there must be something very significant about him in this story and prophetic sign. I believe there is. Also, what is the significance of the 1924 Olympics, said to be the first modern Olympics? And by the way, Olympics, the coming together of nations, is Antichrist and Antichrist system symbolism. And also, again, Harold Abrahams is a Jew. And again, in the end times, Jacob's hour of trouble, the world's nations will gang up and also ultimately try to destroy Israel. There are a number of things about this 1924 Olympics, which I can't get into in this video, and its role in this Chariots of Fire story. Therefore, the 1924 Olympics should give us some prophetic meaning as well. A part of Abraham's story is his Jewish faith. Abraham's was also able to defeat the favorites and win gold in the 100-meter race at this 1924 Olympics. This was an amazing confirmation that the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ is 100 years, as in 100-meter race, after this 1924 Olympics. The second coming of Lord Jesus Christ will be in 2024, 100 years after this 1924 Olympics, in which Harold Abrahams won the 100-meter race. Like Liddell, Abrahams had a story that continued beyond the Olympics. He went on to become a legendary sports announcer. This symbolized his 100-meter race announcing the return of the Lord in 2024. And the Lord's return will announce to the world, hence Olympics symbolism, who their God is. If we consider it, the Lord would give us such a sign as this 100 years connection before his return. This is also similar to the prophetic sign that was the Washington Nationals World Series Baseball Championship win in 2019. There is far too much to the 2019 Washington Nationals prophetic sign to explain here. But one aspect of this Washington Nationals prophetic sign was the victory parade. The World Series was won in the stadium in Houston, and after the game, the star player Ryan Zimmerman, whose nickname is Mr. Nationals because he played his entire 16-year career with the team since the team first relocated from Montreal to Washington, said that the victory parade would be a homecoming. The name Ryan in Irish means king, and the name Zimmerman in German means carpenter. The King of Kings, Jesus Christ, was a carpenter. The victory parade in Washington, D.C. was only the second time in history there was a victory parade for a Washington baseball team. The last time the Nationals won the World Series was in 1924. A news story from the parade was how the coach and a player took a photo with a fan in a wheelchair that had a helium balloon tied to it with the number 100. On that very day of the victory parade, this World War II veteran and fan of the Nationals was celebrating his 100th birthday. This homecoming and second in history victory parade in Washington since 1924, and the 100-year-old veteran of World War II, communicated that the homecoming and second coming of Lord Jesus Christ will be 100 years after 1924 in 2024. And when Lord Jesus Christ will return in 2024 with his saints, it will be a victory parade. What is additional confirmation for this second coming prophetic sign is that the victory parade was held on the second day of the 11th month, which hints at 11 times 2 equals 22, and had a scheduled start time of 2 p.m. The second coming in 2024 will be Judgment Day, and from the Bible, the number 11 symbolizes the execution of judgment. This is why the number 11 and the number 2 in the date. And this is why Ryan Zimmerman, who said that the victory parade would be a homecoming, wears jersey number 11. As well, the finish line in Abraham's 100-meter race is symbolism for the end of the course, the end of the race, the end of the age of fishing for men. And one thing, too, that I forgot to mention earlier, I think, is that the Apostle Paul referred to a Christian's walk and life as a race. He said that we are all runners in a race, looking to receive the prize, and encouraged us to run so that we may obtain it. All right, I just want to very briefly go through 2 diagrams here before we end this video. They are just illustrations that demonstrate the connections that confirm, some of the connections that confirm June 27th as being the day that Israel will bomb Iran. And the reason for this diagram, for example, is that we are talking about this 9 weeks connection, which I just finished explaining, from the signs that occurred on April 26th, including the senator from the 3rd state hinting at possibly 3 times 3 weeks. But I also explained just now the other reasons for the number 9 in the evangelist sign and this 9 weeks. There's more confirmations of the 9 weeks, which I'll get to in a second. But here's one, and is that it is exactly 99 weeks back from June 27th to the day which was the 44th president's birthday, Barack Obama's birthday in 2020, the day of the massive explosion in the harbor of Beirut in Lebanon. The prophetic significance of this is explained in other videos. Again, the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And the number 9 from the Bible symbolizes God's judgment, and God uses frequently the number 90 to symbolize the number 9. It is exactly 90 weeks to April 26th, which in turn is 9 weeks. So that is a further confirmation, a second witness of this 99 weeks and 9 weeks connection. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes it true and not a product of one's imagination. And what makes this, what is being explained on this channel, different and unique than everything else on the internet. All right, so more confirmation of that, as it will be explained in other videos. What I mean by that is the other videos that are talking about this prediction of Israel bombing Iran on June 27th. It is amazing. I won't explain it here. I'm just pointing this out. It is exactly 9 plus 9 plus 9 years to the extremely prophetic brawl, the bench-clearing brawl of both teams, with Nolan Ryan, the strikeout king, on the pitching mound on Barack Obama's birthday. God uses pitchers on the pitching mound, including the strikeout king, to hint at the Antichrist king on the Temple Mount in the end times. All right, more confirmation is that this Beirut explosion was 90 plus 90 plus 90 days exactly to this biggest disaster, civil disaster in Israel's history, which was the Stampede Crush on April 30th, 2021, and was first initially reported there being 44 deaths, which is pointing to the Antichrist, the 44th president that will be in Israel on the Temple Mount persecuting Israel and the Jews during the end times. This was another date that was known ahead of time. Again, April 26th was known ahead of time. This date was also predicted ahead of time to be relevant regarding the day that Israel will nuke Iran. All right, this day also was 9 days after this prophetic sign, which was the discovery of the Indonesian submarine, the 44-year-old submarine. And this will be explained in other videos too. Indonesia is a country that God points to identify the Antichrist, the 44th president that grew up in Indonesia for 4 years, hence the 44-year-old submarine, and on regarding Indonesia. I won't get into it here. And also, the submarine is also relevant too because of its connection to other signs with symbolism that include submarines. And the two other major signs involving submarines that I am referring to, the Argentine submarine and the Kim Wall journalist murder on a submarine, both are signs that are about nuclear bombs. All right, now here again is this 9 weeks. And as explained in other videos, God pairs the numbers 9 and 110 together to confirm the signs and connections and to hint at 9/11. Joshua, who led the Hebrews around the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho, died at the age of 110. The twin stories on 9/11 were made up of 110 floors, and Wall Street was named after the 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. It's been explained so many times I won't explain it again, but it will be explained in the upcoming videos if you watch them regarding, and I recommend that you do watch them because they are amazing stories, and every video has a unique story that God is telling. And so once the prediction comes to pass, I think you should know that you should watch every minute of every video on this channel, and that will be the only way you will be able to appreciate the big picture of science, because it's impossible to explain at once, let alone in one video. Anyway, 1 month and 10 days hints at 110. So that confirms the 9 weeks connection right there. Furthermore, this is connected to with 110 days. This was the day of the synagogue shooting in the Rich Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh. The media called it the Rich Squirrel Hill neighborhood. This will be explained in other videos. This 1 month, 10 days is back to the Chariots of Fire sign, which we've just been talking about. And so it's not only 6 weeks, because that's also 6 weeks from recall, and that's confirmed by, again, the album 666, the 6 weeks connection, but 6 weeks is also 1 month and 10 days, which confirms the 9 weeks. All right, 7 times in Bible prophecy, 42 months period is a reference to or symbolism for the period of the Antichrist's rule in the end times period. That's why this 42 weeks connection is relevant, and a second witness to it, which is, again, what is required to confirm a matter, is this 36 weeks connection. And 36 weeks is also Antichrist symbolism because God uses the number 36 because it symbolizes the number 666, because 36 is 6 times 6, but also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666, and 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, all the way up to 36 equals 666. And so 36 weeks back from the Chariots of Fire sign and 42 weeks back from the day Israel will nuke Iran was this Feast of Trumpets. And I won't explain it here. There's many signs on this date, including the 7.0 magnitude earthquake on the other side of the border wall of security in Mexico. And God uses earthquakes in Mexico to symbolize judgment Jericho symbolism, because the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho collapsed due to an earthquake. But also, this was the day of the very prophetic and significant IAEA report. The IAEA organization, agency, is the United Nations agency that monitors nuclear weapon proliferation, and they do the monitoring inside Iran, and their report was very negative on this day. It talked about the breakout time and things of that nature, but it was a significant report because it was the report that came after the attack of Israel on April 11th in 2021. That's also explained in another video, so I won't explain it here. But this day was in turn exactly 2,300 days to the day that Obama signed the Iran deal. The Antichrist signed the Iran deal. Prince of Persia's Antichrist symbolism once again. Also, 2,300 days is a number of days that is associated with the Antichrist described in prophecy in Daniel chapter 8. And so it is amazing that the Antichrist, the day that he signed the Iran deal into law, it is exactly 2,300 days to this Feast of Trumpets and the IAEA report regarding Iran and the 7.0 magnitude earthquakes, which, by the way, hints at the number 7, God's signature number, but also the number 70, which symbolizes the 70th week, which is symbolism in Daniel chapter 9, the chapter after this, chapter 8, for the period of the Antichrist's rule. And then again, number 42 also symbolizes the period of the Antichrist's rule, and then it's 42 weeks exactly to the day Israel will bomb Iran. So it's a straight 2,300 days and 42 weeks from the day Obama signed the Iran deal to the day Israel will bomb Iran. It's amazing. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.